Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I thought I would talk more about Brexit, because for anyone who's been following the news in the UK in recent weeks, the whole situation has continued to descend into complete farce. UK politics is now all about the Prime Minister and his staff holding a whole series of parties during lockdown, during national lockdown, when no one was allowed to actually meet anybody else, including the Queen when she was burying her husband. So that is the current scandal in UK politics. And what does this have to do with Brexit, I might hear you ask? Well, strictly speaking, it should be nothing. But in reality, it is everything. And you can see that in some of the media and the newspaper reporting, where they are trying to desperately drum up support for Brexit by telling people to support the leadership, support the Prime Minister, no matter how much wrong he does, because if the UK public fails to do so, then the whole Brexit project is at risk. I am the collaborative negotiator. I'm a professional negotiator of 10 years experience, and I try to talk about a variety of negotiation topics on a calm and rational manner. I will apologise in advance if I start to get a little bit ranty, perhaps, and moralising, but I'm starting to get a little bit peeved with this whole thing. And I kind of just want to explain why. And I will get to the point. I will get to explain why this is important for anyone who wants to understand negotiation skills. Because Brexit, of course, itself is the big negotiation failure of our time. So, of course, people like me will want to talk about it. So let's kick off. Why has it all gone wrong? There are so many reasons. I could be here for a very long time, but I'll just put a few summarised ones here just to try and explain why Brexit and anything associated with Brexit, including trade agreements, including democratic reform, including economic welfare, social welfare, anything you care to name, it is all going wrong. And why? Well, the first obvious one for everybody, and this is no real secret, is of course the whole project was built on a whole series of lies by so many people. So you can't really deliver upon a lie, and that I think is fairly obvious. So that is obvious. Let's get that out of the way. That's the obvious first reason why Brexit, and anyone who believed in Brexit can feel rather betrayed. They were promised something, and that promise was never going to be fulfilled. I've also seen people commenting quite accurately that one of the big issues for Brexit, because there are some arguments for Brexit, there are some cases you can make to do it. But of course, to do that, you have to have a clear sense of objective, a clear sense of reason as to what you're doing, why you're doing it. And that has never been there. Many people voted for Brexit for quite a wide variety of reasons. Not that many people all voted for one consistent reason. We shan't talk about the racist aspects of the Brexit campaign, but that is of course one of many reasons. So what that means is you don't have a large element of buy-in. You don't have people buying into the vision of Brexit in the same way. So that's another reason why all these things are going wrong. But then we're starting to hit into the more damaging reasons for why Brexit has failed so badly, and why anyone who even voted for it can feel so utterly betrayed, let alone anyone who voted against it. The issue here is leadership. And it's built to the first point about lies. Those who, as Plato famously once said, the problem with democracy is it's not the best person that wins, it's the person that shouts the loudest. And that has been very much the case here. The Brexiteers have been the ones shouting the loudest. And as the consequence, they have been the ones put in charge despite their appalling lack of ability. And so they have been voted for, they have been selected to progress the Brexit project, even though they were, on the face of it, really bad candidates to do so. And I think that's the problem. That is the problem when you have a very dysfunctional democratic system that doesn't really reward those with merit, just reward those who makes lots of noise, essentially, maybe have good TV images and whatever. It doesn't actually reward quiet people who get on with the job and do so competently. And this has been absolutely evident for Brexit. You look at all the people who are meant to deliver it, and with very few exceptions, you cannot look at them and say, yeah, I respect that individual. Yes, I believe they are capable. Because they're not. That is the fundamental truth. But here's the other factor. The decision-making had not just been dysfunctional at the top. The decision-making had been dysfunctional at the bottom as well. And there are two reasons for that. One is a sense of entitlement. Those at the top have felt entitled to be in power. They have felt entitled to deliver Brexit, whether that's because they've won an election, whether that is because they were brought up that way, whatever it may be. Those at the top have felt that entitlement to do things as they see fit, regardless of what anyone else says, including even those who support Brexit, but do so for more measured reasons, with a clearer sense of outcome. They've been ignored because they have not fitted into that entitlement club. The second reason why the decision-making has been so dysfunctional is ideological. There are many people who have felt passionately for and against Brexit. And that itself can be a problem. Because those who strongly believe in Brexit, and they may even do so for good reasons, I'm not going to make a judgment here. Obviously, there are many people who did so for bad reasons. But let's work on the assumption that they voted for Brexit for good reasons. The problem is that they're so ideologically wedded to the concept of Brexit and for the need for Brexit to happen that they ignore everything else. They ignore the lies. They ignore the appalling poor leadership selection and the continuing decision and incompetence that was demonstrated. And they kept on going, kept on giving their support to those people because for them it was important that the ideology might be delivered. And as a consequence of all of that, the sense of entitlement and the ideological drivers, been a refusal to see reason. You don't have to believe in something to acknowledge when it's going wrong and when you need to change course, when you need to correct things. But if you are ideologically driven, then anything that tells you you're wrong, even in a small way, is something that mentally, perhaps, consciously or subconsciously, you may reject. And that has been a big part of the issue for those who've supported Brexit. They've refused to see reason. They've rejected the warning sign, the alarm bell that says that, if nothing else, choose better leaders to deliver Brexit. They've refused to acknowledge facts or to make changes. And what this comes up to is the important point that I want to make when it comes to understanding how to be a negotiator. Is that if there is a complete inability to make a challenge, all these problems will arise. You cannot fix things if you cannot acknowledge there's a problem. And I've seen it often, time and time again, in various negotiations. People have found themselves stuck in a rut, stuck in defending their positions, because they found themselves unable to accept the challenge, to see the reason, and to find a way through the problem. And Brexit is one of the most stunning examples of this that we have today. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of challenge and belief. Previously, I've said that belief is important to a negotiator. And I think actually that's the wrong word. I shouldn't have used the word belief. I should have used the word conviction. And what I mean by that is that when you're conducting a negotiation, you've got to have the conviction that the position you're pushing forward is sound, it is solid, it is something that can be strongly argued for, and that hopefully you have a good case for winning that argument with the other side. Now, of course, you may have to reach a compromise with the other side because they may feel equally, their equal level of conviction in their position. And what is important in terms of any negotiation, in terms of making progress, is the ability to acknowledge if their conviction is based on solid foundations. It is also important to make sure that your convictions are built on solid foundation. So what I mean by that is you cannot have blind faith in your position in order to succeed at a negotiation. You've got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your own position as well as the other side. So belief is not enough, actually. You need conviction to succeed at negotiation. You need conviction to see through the argument, to counter-argue, and the ability to change when you can acknowledge that actually what you perhaps thought was right is not quite so right. Doesn't mean it was totally wrong. It might mean there's an element of not quite right, an element of fixing it, and then it's tweaking that you need to do. So what is important as a negotiator, and I suppose this is true for anyone in a position of leadership as well, is that you should never put yourself in a position of refusing to acknowledge reality, of refusing to seek the truth, to understand what are the actual facts, what have you assumed, what do you believe, and what can be proven or disproved, as the case may be. And this is even more important if you're negotiating for something that you genuinely do believe in, like Brexit. If you feel strongly about something, then I would argue you should be even more determined to try and pick holes in it. Because when you do that, you strengthen your argument. You find out where all the weaknesses are. You pre-think of all the things that you would counter to that. That might even mean you can do things. You can take mitigating action to address those flaws that you have identified. But if you go ahead with a negotiating position or any kind of policy position, particularly in a political context, and think that there are no flaws, then the honest truth is that you've not been looking hard enough. Because there's always flaws in something. The issue is, have you found it, rather than just trying to pretend it doesn't exist. And this is always going to be one of my biggest criticisms of Brexit. It never wanted to look at the flaws in its argument, and it never wanted to identify how to solve those problems. So one of the core skills for any negotiator, junior or senior, is the ability to challenge, the ability to speak truth to power. You can be a great communicator, you can be a great organizer, you can be a whole host of all the skill sets that I previously identified as a negotiator. But if you just have no ability to challenge the position whatsoever, you will very often find yourself fighting a losing battle. Fighting a battle where you're going to lack conviction, where you can be easily dismantled by the other side that does have conviction. So part of the process of obtaining conviction is testing everything. And it's not just enough to test the analysis, test the people working for you. It's even more important to have the ability to challenge those above you, to make them think, oh, is this right? Oh, do I need to go a bit further with this? Do I need to think about this a little bit more? And this does not have to be a destructive, controversial, confrontational type of thing, or aggressive. It doesn't need to be any of those things. It can be constructive. It can be a positive process. You just have to understand how to do it right. And this is where it comes to having confidence, to having judgment, and the ability to take and give respect as well for other people's positions. And to finish on all of that, never forget that it's equally important that you yourself can be challenged, whether from above, whether from below, and even to challenge yourself. Critically analyze everything and put create a culture that allows other people to constructively, critically analyze what you do as well. And this is going to be the final thing I'm going to talk about with Brexit. The whole Brexit project has refused to allow constructive challenge. The whole belief was either you supported Brexit or you were the enemy. And that language has been used by politicians, and that has been utterly shameful and disgraceful. Because what it has done, it has created a culture that refuses to allow people to make a constructive challenge to the project in order for it to be delivered successfully. And you have to ask yourself why. Why had Brexit created this toxic culture, this awful environment where the most despicable people are in charge of it, and nobody can voice a proper challenge, a proper ability to get things back on track if that's what they believe, needs doing? And I think part of the answer is because despite its name, Brexit was not really about leaving the EU. Brexit was an ideological battle. It was perhaps a cultural war. It's perhaps neoliberalism. It was perhaps the desire for self-enrichment, self-entitlement. Any of those things. There's a whole list of negative phrases you can use when you look at those who promoted Brexit so aggressively. And when you apply that sort of language, well, why? Why would they want to wreck their country so comprehensively? What is the end goal? And unfortunately, whatever they thought the end goal was, the end result is that Brexit has subverted UK democracy. The proroguing of Parliament, the lies, the parties, the rule breaking, the criminal action that has been taken, the criminal activities that have taken place and been justified by those at the top has been utterly shameful. And this is the whole issue about the ideological drivers. They've been allowed to get away with it because they must not be challenged because they're trying to deliver Brexit. You should never have a position like that. You should always challenge people who will never behave in a morally acceptable way. And this is the issue. They are subverting UK democracy. They are destroying democracy when really the stated aim of Brexit was to fix UK democracy. And this is an exceedingly dangerous and disturbing place to go. Because those sorts of people, it's an indefensible aim. And even if they won't acknowledge it to themselves, because this is one of the things about corruption. Corruption is not just an activity that those practicing it carrying it out. Corruption is something that infects those doing it. And I'm going to quote Desmond Tutu here, and he's someone that died recently, and there was quite a lot of eulogies to him. And actually, there's something that they quoted from him, which I thought was really, really impactful, really insightful. And Desmond Tutu went to the occupied territories in Palestine, in Israel, and he got into quite a lot of trouble for some of the comments that he made. But he said something very insightful. And he has said, in those sorts of scenarios, it is not just the victims that are dehumanized, it is the oppressors as well. They themselves become dehumanized by their actions. And so I want to emphasize that those at the top have dehumanized themselves. They believe in what they do so absolutely that they believe anything justifies what they do, even if the cost is an economy in tatters, a democratic system that is completely dysfunctional and broken because of the abuse that has been subjected to. And so this is why it is even more important now that anyone, whether it's through the ballot box, whether it's those working to deliver Brexit, in government or other in a think tank or in Parliament, they need to have the ability to challenge, to do so in a way that finds solutions to the problem, not just creates more problems. Because if that culture continues and refuses to allow that kind of constructive thought process, then things will only continue to get worse. They will never get better. And UK democracy will end up in a very dark place indeed. So my apologies for perhaps the ranty, moralising nature of that. But I hope you can understand this concept that I've explained to him and apply that in any personal or professional context that you may be engaged in. As I've always said, Brexit is a great example of so many failures. You should not think that doesn't happen elsewhere. Even in the most simple projects, there's some very common themes here. So let's look at this. Let's learn the lessons from some truly awful examples, and let's see what we can do to apply those lessons learned to make ourselves better individuals in terms of how we conduct ourselves and how we achieve our goals. So thank you for this. If you do like this channel, this video, please do like and subscribe. Welcome all comments from people. Please, of course, do try and keep this respectful and polite. I know this can create strong feelings, including by myself, but at all times we should always remember to try and portray the person that we want other people to see.